Here's a look at some of the times when Chris was really flexing his any percent speedrun muscles when catching creeps. And this dude right here went from having everything to absolutely nothing. So Anurag Tiwari had the education and job anybody would dream of having. The 29-year-old engineer at Sun Microsystems was having the time of his life, so much so that he thought he was untouchable. So Tiwari hopped into this chat thinking he was talking to someone he could share his experience with. And no, but he didn't want to stick to the chats alone. He wanted to give her a taste of what the real deal actually felt like. With absolutely no hesitation at all, the dude offered to use his tongue in very interesting ways. And what was his reason behind it? Because she was so very young and fresh. Like, what am I even supposed to say here? And I mean, forget about that. The dude was already asking her exactly what position she wanted him to, well, perform in. Like, this conversation was so vile that I'm literally struggling to figure out how to put it into words. Fast forward to less than a week, and Tiwari was driving over to meet the love of his life. But guess who was waiting for him? Chris, of course. And Tiwari only had one choice: to play it cool.
Well, I had no intention of doing anything. I mean...
Yeah, right. Totally believe you, dude. To debunk his little pretense, Chris started to read from the chat logs, and boy, did it get awkward. Tiwari started this huge rant full of excuses, and man, seriously, he didn't even take a second to think it through. First, he claimed that his friend was chatting using his screen name. Sure, buddy, why not? Go off, King, and well, he certainly did.
There was a party going on, and someone logged into my computer.
There was a party going on.
Yeah, right. But who's gonna believe that? But Chris isn't having any of it. He pointed out the obvious. There was some seriously explicit stuff in the transcript. Tiwari was either throwing the biggest party ever with his computer accessible to everyone in town, or he was just plain lying. I think you know which is more likely here. But let me tell you, his excuses were absolutely deluded. Either way, since he couldn't stick to his story, Chris decided to put him out of his misery and came forth with the big reveal.
Who try to meet teens online. Now, if there's anything else you'd like to tell me.
No, I don't want to.
Ah, did you catch Tiwari's expression? Priceless. And what was he trying to cover his face for? Sorry, my man, but it's a little too late for that. But who's gonna tell him that? The cops, of course. Once Chris revealed his true identity, Tiwari bolted out faster than he could think of the consequences and landed straight into the arms of the cops waiting right outside. But that wasn't the end of his twisted story. Back in the interrogation center, when the detective put him in a tight spot, Tiwari tried to play innocent. And guess what was his go-to excuse? Curiosity. Okay, come on. Curious about what exactly? And wait, because the next thing you know, he pulled the "I'm a respected guy with a PhD" card. Sorry, buddy. You could have had all the accolades in the world, but a crime's still a crime. And this viewer right here couldn't have said it more bluntly, and I completely agree with what they're saying here. Now back to Tiwari. After getting busted, he decided to stir up even more trouble. Sometime in 2011, he slapped NBC with a lawsuit claiming they trampled all over his Fourth Amendment rights, defamed him, and gave him serious emotional grief. Apparently, the network used him for better TRP rating. Yeah, because they found nobody else, right? Of course, NBC wasn't having it. They fired back and filed a protective order against the prick. But guess what? The dude played the "I'm so mentally tortured" card, and as it turns out, NBC isn't off the hook just yet. Yeah, the legal system has had its own loopholes, something that still really needs to be worked on. But here comes another dude in his prime who was cruising through the internet looking for the perfect person to play with, and when he found them, he landed on the show. Yep, that's the story of 36-year-old Todd Lewis in a nutshell. And apparently that little tidbit was more than a tidbit. It was a way of life for guy, considering it was hardly the first time he'd been in the position he was about to find himself in. The dude was busted for the same old crime not that long before his stint on TCAP. And get this, he blamed his previous victim for ratting him out to her mom. Yeah, go ahead, man. Blame everyone around you except yourself. You'll definitely learn from your mistakes that way. And by the way, he also casually mentioned that he was on probation. Looks like we got ourselves a real winner on our hands, huh? That was just the beginning of his messed up story. Soon he was checking in on her purity and her willingness to put it to the test. But here comes the mother of all jokes. According to him, certain bodily fluids doubled as some kind of teeth whitening life hack. I mean, let that serve an example of how screwed up the guy was. And the next thing you know, he was revving up his motorcycle and embarking on a 6-hour journey. crossing almost 2 states just to get to this sting house in Ocean County. Talk about going the extra mile. And well, once he arrived, guess what he brought as a peace offering?
Okay, I wasn't sure what you liked, so I got you M&M's and Hershey.
Oh, nice, thanks.
Well, how about some brownies in exchange? Oh, Lewis was all impressed by the hospitality and even asked if she was always this polite. Sorry buddy, but she's just buttering you up before you get busted. So glad you fell for the bait. Anyway, from here on out, it didn't take long for Chris to swoop right in and call him out on his previous run-ins with the show.
Right.
Yes.
And tell me about that case.
No, I won't.
But Lewis was trying to squirm his way out of trouble, saying he wasn't technically going all the way. Turns out he wanted to know who he was dealing with before he went ahead with the deed. But once Chris revealed his true identity, the change in Lewis's attitude was like night and day.
The funny thing is, I had a feeling something was up.
Yeah, sure. Blame it on your previous offender status as if that excuses your behavior. If anything, it makes it worse. As the cameras rolled out, Lewis started packing up his stuff to make a run for it. But the Ocean County police made sure he didn't get far. And just like that, the party was over. So what's the aftermath, you ask? Lewis was hit with the usual bevy of charges, and it took a grueling 2 years for his case to wrap up. And in the end, he caved and pleaded guilty, landing himself a cozy 5-year stay in the big house. Not exactly the kind of homecoming he'd been expecting, but hey, looks like karma finally caught up with him. Just like what happened with this next guy. So this moron, Joshua Colin, decided to take a wild road trip in the pouring rain all the way from Glendale, New York to Fairfield, Connecticut, which is like over 50 miles. I mean, talk about dedication, or should I say desperation. Let's stick with desperation. So this dude showed up at the Sting house with an overnight bag like he was about to have a sleepover. What's more, he strutted inside, locked the door behind him, and started chatting like everything was totally normal.
Poppy, come on in. It's so good to see you.
Wait, did you say Poppy? Ew. I mean, if you really wanted to be a sugar daddy, then you gotta do better than bringing dinner just for yourself. Splurge on that extra item from the dollar menu at least. But well, Colin had more to do. He asked to use the restroom, but not before dropping this line about her looking even better in person than her online pic. Meanwhile, while Colin did his thing with his colon, Chris was preparing to play his part.
Oh, right over there, please.
Oh crap is absolutely correct. I mean, dude almost got caught with his pants down.
12. I know. It was wrong.
Anyway, Chris tried to back him up in the corner, and Colin finally gave in. He admitted that he indeed was planning to do it with her. But there was more he planned to do than just the physical act. He even talked about marriage, and somehow he assumed that would make things alright.
If she was old enough.
If she was old enough. But why would you even say that to a 12-year-old?
Now, Chris took this opportunity to throw the question back at him. What if someone pulled the same move on his own family? To which Colin was left speechless. And when asked about protection, you have to hear his response.
Where are they?
In my bag.
What else is in the bag?
Clothes and toothbrush, stuff like that.
Talk about being prepared for all the wrong reasons. And just when you thought it couldn't get any cringier, Chris decided to bring up his favorite word, hop, and Colin immediately withdrew back into his shell.
Latin.
No kidding. Chris then started digging deeper, asking if Colin had any previous run-ins with people her age, and Colin was quick to deny any face-to-face encounters, but he revealed something that was insane.
Contacted an underage girl online before.
Yes.
We have evidence of that, too.
His responses were so calm, it was honestly creeping me out. But wait, it gets juicier. Chris dropped the bomb that he'd got his hands on another explicit chat log involving Colin with someone else posing as the same age as this person. Talk about a double whammy. Colin totally understood where this little interview was heading. He said it himself, I got no choice but to go to jail. But wait, he then added saying that he totally deserves it. When it was time for the arrest, Colin threw another curveball by asking to hit the washroom real quick. Yeah, sorry buddy, but that's not exactly the best escape plan. Well, of course, he was duly handed over to the cops right after. But this next dude sent Chris on a totally different kind of tailspin, and you're soon about to see why. Alright, meet Charles Lauren, a 59-year-old accountant from Fairfield, Connecticut, who found himself right in the middle of a sting that would put his high-profile career to an end. So this dude pretended to be bi-curious, hoping to turn the setup into someone who could appreciate the joys of guys over the same old boring women. But well, it looks like the setup had a surprise in store.
Working with the cooperation of Fairfield, Connecticut Police and Tetrad Corps.
Turns out, Charles and the setup were practically neighbors. But instead of taking a leisurely stroll for about 5 to 7 minutes, Charles decided to hop in his car and drive a measly third of a mile to his date's place. Probably wanted to save his energy for later, if you get what I mean. I mean, considering he brought some not so decent videos titled Seattle Bareback Boys stashed in his car, I'm sure Charles had a lot of plans for the evening.
Good. Come in.
But once Chris popped out, Charles did something that was completely unexpected.
And if he thinks he's in for a shock, so am I.
What are you doing here?
Yep, he dashed right outside only to be greeted by the boys in blue. And what did the cops find in his car? Yep, you guessed it. More incriminating evidence. Now, during his interrogation, Charles tried to blame it on his bad eyesight, claiming he misread it as 18. No, I am not kidding.
I would have shut it right down. I would have blocked him right then and there.
However, in the end, he was charged with 3 felonies and was sentenced appropriately. Fast forward to June 15, 2018, after serving 2 years behind bars, Charles was a free man once again. By the way, he's the same guy who Chris recognized from his daily commute. No wonder he bolted as soon as he saw Chris at the Sting House. Despite their past friendship, let's just say that Chris wasn't exactly thrilled to see him, calling him out as slime after catching him red-handed. Ouch. Talk about a rough reunion. Well, the next one was no better than this slime. So we've got Thomas Coffin in the house. With just 10 minutes, this 31-year-old was laying it on thick, talking about wanting a girlfriend despite the age gap. But it doesn't stop there. Oh nah. Thomas started getting all explicit, chatting about his junk and other not-so-PG things that he wanted to do. As if that's not enough, he then went ahead and sent her a pic of his you-know-what. Keep it classy, Thomas. And get this, throughout the convo, Thomas kept randomly buzzing like a broken alarm clock, which totally annoyed her. But did Thomas care? Nope. He just kept buzzing away like it was no big deal. Talk about being persistent. So after all that, they actually set up a day to meet. Guess some people never learn. Thomas rolled up to the Sting House with a bunch of things that are totally inappropriate to bring.
He's out of the vehicle.
What is he carrying?
We were trying to figure out what Thomas Coffin had.
You'd think that this guy is a supplier with all that stuff, right? He strolled onto the house, and before he could even settle in, Chris decided to hop on duty. Quick on his feet, Thomas tried to spin a yarn about looking for work.
I do blacktop sealing.
Blacktop ceiling.
Yeah.
Coffin's story didn't make a lot of sense.
Blacktop sealant. Well, at least you can't say he wasn't creative. But as expected, that lie didn't last long. Thomas cracked under the impression and admitted he lied because he wasn't a fan of getting in trouble. Like, who is? Anyway, Chris started laying into him, asking why he thought it was cool to send indecent pics to someone her age. Chris then pulled out Thomas's chat log and started reading aloud. Turns out, Thomas always had a thing for folks like this.
Younger, like 19, 20. That's what I meant by that.
Setup. But of course, he tried to play it off like he meant people in their late teens. Yeah, because that makes it all better, right? What's more, Thomas then claimed his computer was infected by some kind of virus that magically typed out all those sketchy things. Because everyone knows about the virus that types creepy nonsense into random chat rooms, specifically to people like the setup, and forces you to drive over to their home. Everybody's caught that once or twice, right? But obviously, Chris wasn't buying it. And to make things worse, he hit him with the sarcastic question of the century.
My name, too.
You're not trying to tell me that you didn't have this conversation.
Talk about getting called out in style. But Thomas wasn't ready to give up. He tried to spin this wild tale about his cousin hopping onto his computer and chatting it up under his name. But let's be real here. Guess who showed up at the Sting House? The cousin? Of course not. Thomas got caught in his own web of lies and finally admitted to typing all those explicit chats himself.
You typed this.
There was no intentions of me doing that.
But, yeah, right, buddy. Keep telling yourself that. Now, get this. When Chris asked if he brought any rubber, Thomas whipped them out of his vest pocket like it was no big deal. But leave it to Chris to add fuel to the fire.
I always have them.
You always carry them right here in your breast pocket. But for easy access?
No.
He was so brutal with his attack that Thomas started stumbling over his own words, as if he wasn't spilling spaghetti everywhere already. But wait, it gets even crazier. When Chris asked if he had any kids, turns out Thomas had 3 of them. And get this, he even swore on their lives that he had no intention of doing anything with the setup.
I mean, it's wrong on every level anyway. But then to have a 14-year-old daughter.
Yeah, I'd hate to say it, but those kids are toast if their lives rely solely on this guy telling the truth.
Straight up with you. You know, I swear on my own kids' life that I'm being straight up with you.
So as soon as the cameras rolled out, Thomas made a run for it, only to get cuffed by the cops waiting outside. And guess what?
Get on the ground!
We're prepared to have.
He wasn't alone in the backseat of the police car. He was sharing the ride with none other than Michael Willis, who I intended to go over more detail on not too long from now. Still, that must have been a hell of a drive over to the station. And he was also slapped with a whole load of other charges, one for each of the kids he had, in fact. And guess what? The judge did not go easy on him. Thomas was hit with a hefty sentence, 29 months and 3 days behind bars, with a measly 172 days credited for time served. On top of that, he was struck with 3 years of probation, had to register as a lifetime offender, and fork over some serious cash for court costs. But this is where it gets even worse. Thomas's life has taken a massive nosedive since then. He's been busted for driving with a suspended license in 2016 and nabbed for possession of pot in 2017. Dude just couldn't stay out of trouble. So what's he up to now? Well, Thomas decided to skip town and head over to Lebanon, Pennsylvania, where he's now living the life as a registered offender. According to his page, he's currently cooling his heels behind bars for, honestly, who freaking knows at this point? Well, I think it's best that he stick around there for the foreseeable future. For our sakes anyway. But here comes an episode where Chris managed to grill not 1, but 2 freaks at the same time.
I'm sorry.
You're sorry for what?
I'm talking about Safraz Khan, a potential weirdo who was caught in the Flagler Beach investigation. Now, what makes this dude stand out? Well, like I mentioned earlier, he was basically the sidekick to Yazanas 4, aka slave to mistresses. Yeah, they rolled in together like an unfortunate double act, trying to hook up with the same setup at the same place. Can you believe the odds of this happening? Safraz Khan and Yazanas 4 ended up causing a ruckus in Florida, and the team couldn't believe they landed 2 dudes at the same time. For now, let's throw the spotlight on the younger of the 2. Safraz Khan was 25 years old at the time of the sting, but you wouldn't believe it just by looking at him. But this dude, in fact, was a psychology student. But guess what? Despite his educational background, he didn't see anything wrong with saying the things he did, nor did he care that the setup was, well, you know. What's more, he kept talking to the setup about how big he was and all the things he wanted them to do together. And this wasn't a 1 or 2 day thing. This explicit chat went on for 3 weeks, and the entire time, he didn't show a single bit of remorse or guilt.
I came to meet someone that was underage.
And then there came a point when he started freaking out. The thought of getting in trouble started to haunt him. He then went ahead and shared his concerns with the setup, saying, "I'm a bit scared to meet up with you, and I might end up behind bars." Oh, if you only knew, my guy. So fast forward to the day of the sting, and Khan rolled up to the sting house thinking he was meeting the chick he'd been chatting with. But surprise, surprise, the voice didn't match the one he was expecting. Well, of course he grew suspicious, and it kind of put him off. But his burning need to get busy took over, and he simply couldn't help himself but barge right in and give it a shot. Chris took the hint and decided to show up, and Khan was received with the VIP treatment at the bar. And even before Chris could get comfortable, the dude started apologizing left and right for his questionable choices. He started to rant, claiming that he'd made a horrible mistake and he'd finally learned a big lesson. And just when things were getting interesting with Khan, guess who strolled right in? None other than Yazanas 4. These two had a lot more in common than they'd like to admit.
Why don't you come in over here and stand right over here at the bar? How are you?
Chris, who was overjoyed at the sight of two morons, was all set for a unique confrontation. He had S4 sit right next to Safraz for the ultimate interrogation, as S4 was left confused at exactly what was happening. I mean, this dude walked himself right into the confrontation, with neither the sweet tea nor the cookies to lure him in. And just as he started struggling with his words, Khan spilled the beans that they were probably gonna end up in cuffs after this face-off. Hey, you said it, not me. Things started to get even more interesting when S4 started playing the confusion card, and Khan, man, he was freaking out, sweating bullets, worried that his fam was gonna catch wind of this mess. In a desperate attempt, Khan was trying to make things right, owning up to his weak spots.
This is something that would just ruin my life.
And then it was time for the big reveal. Chris dropped the bomb the two pricks were going to be making their television debuts, and S4 looked like he was slapped in the face. As for Khan, he probably saw it coming from a mile away. In the end, Khan managed to cough up one last apology and he was out the door, only to be nabbed right outside. S4 wasn't far behind, and soon they were both on their way to a not-so-fun destination together.
Out here on the ground.
I mean, this was one hell of a wild encounter. Eventually, Khan, a U.S. permanent resident, got snagged by Immigration and Customs Enforcement back in 2011. The guy ended up stuck in a holding facility for a whopping 3 years while they sorted out deportation hearings as Khan tried to plead his case. Talk about a rocky road. Fast forward to 2015, and Khan found himself shipped back to Guyana. All thanks to his questionable choices. He had to not only leave the country, but also the chance at snagging that degree he was after. Now, imagine an alternate universe where he actually got his act together. Dude would have been a counselor, probably handling therapy sessions for morons who showed up at the Sting House. I mean, clearly, he threw his life away. But this next guy, deemed as one of the most dangerous men to have ever been caught on the show, managed to ruin a lot more than he bargained for. I'm talking about Michael Gentile, the vile dude who was nabbed in the Fairfield, Connecticut sting. And his claim to notoriety? His seriously creepy voice when chatting up the setup. Like seriously, the guy's voice is enough to send shivers down your spine. And not to forget the insane amount of disgusting pictures he shared with the setup on the chat. So picture this, Gentile, a 64-year-old limo driver, decided it was a good idea to hit up someone old enough to be his grandchild. And guess what? The dude wasted no time in going on full creepy mode. Like seriously, his chat was absolutely horrendous.
Hey, my little ex-kitten. How are you, sweetheart?
He kept telling the setup that he liked to flaunt his natural form, and it was just a way of life he truly enjoyed. I mean, sometimes it's crazy to think how delusional people can really be. What's more, he then went on to invite the setup to join groups that have zero regard for covering up. Talk about crossing the line. In other words, modesty to this guy was a foreign concept. Just to make his point, he generously shared a bunch of pictures in a forest, at home, and hold on tight folks, even on the toilet. Yep, you heard that right. Dude had absolutely zero boundaries. And here's the kicker. The bizarre exchange of ideas didn't just fizzle out quickly. Nope, it dragged on for over a month. Can you believe it? A month of enduring this guy's antics.
Social media, Tetrad posts innocuous pictures of real underage girls.
During this extended time frame, Michael wasn't just twiddling his thumb. Oh no, he saw it as the perfect opportunity to groom the setup to his liking. I mean, he literally went over every possible move and position he wanted to try with her. And brace yourselves, he even asked her to play with a banana to get ready for him. But what you're about to hear next is a whole new level of disgusting.
So happy, my little angel. I love you, baby, so much.
Now picture this. Mr. Unhinged, who was boldly laying out his explicit plans, suddenly turned into a nervous wreck when he showed up at the house. The irony, right? As he waltzed into the place, he got all paranoid. First he was like, oh, let's get rid of this troublesome window that could expose me. Smooth move, Michael. But hold on. A wave of realization hit him like a ton of bricks.
It's inside the door.
I'm really sorry.
And in a classic guilty move, guess what he did? He slammed the door shut and started speed walking away without even looking back for a second. Little did he know, his grand escape was about to hit a major roadblock. But this is where the Gentile saga took an even darker turn.
Be shocked when you hear what cops say Gentile was planning.
A kiddie porn manufacturing.
As if, well, literally everything I mentioned earlier wasn't enough. When the cops decided to search his car, they stumbled upon a key to a nearby hotel room in his possession. Now, why on earth would Michael need to book a hotel room at a time like this? Well, law enforcement headed over to the hotel, and what they found inside was shocking. Michael had stashed away a knife and a camera at the hotel. Now, just let that sink in. Imagine the chilling possibilities if he hadn't been caught in the act.
His only date tonight with detectives at headquarters.
And if that revelation wasn't disturbing enough, brace yourselves for the crazy twist. Turns out the dude was knee-deep in a divorce. In a feeble attempt during the interrogation, he insisted he was just meeting someone he thought was 30 years old, a claim that's as far-fetched as it gets. But hold on, he's not done with the excuses. He kept throwing in the role-playing chat room card, thinking it was some sort of get-out-of-jail-free card. Nice try, buddy, but nobody buys what you're selling. And now, on to the next weirdo who added to the alarming pattern of educators preying on students, as if the power dynamics at play weren't already bad enough. Meet Walter Edward Baps, who is infamous for a memorable line from his chat log. Well, you saw, go get a can of Coke. Walter, a 43-year-old married school teacher, began the chat by referring to the setup as cutie, and specifying that the term was intended in a manner beyond the, well, innocent expression of admiration for a cute girl, of course. He then mentioned to the setup that he loves seeing women in skirts, and especially what was plainly visible underneath. He went on to the extent of sharing that it gave him a big rush, and he even said that he wanted to go over to her house and have a bear encounter. Apparently that would make him a happy man. Way to play into the schoolgirl stereotype, dude. What's more, he even had the audacity to ask her if she was on her period, for reasons beyond the obvious. Yeah. But when the setup mentioned she wanted to use protection, he replied in the most disgusting way, saying he could get out before anything could get in. I mean, this dude had absolutely no respect for boundary. To make things worse, he then shared his profession of being a teacher with her and tried to justify that he would never pull an act with his own students. Do you believe him? Because I don't. Anyway, when Baps showed up at the Sting house, Chris was right there to greet him. And the moment they shook hands, Baps jumped in asking if he was getting arrested. And here's the twist. Instead of giving his real name, he tried to pull a fast one by claiming to be John Hunter. It's a bit too late for that, man. Anyway, when Chris grilled him about his intention, Baps came up with a bizarre plan saying he was just there to get his ass kicked. He boldly declared he knew it was a sting and practically begged Chris to arrest him and put an end to it all. I mean, if that's what you really want, I suppose Chris can arrange that for you.
No, I need you to sit down, please.
I need you to just arrest me and take me to jail and exit.
He then tried to justify that people always lie about their age online, and also went into brushing off listing his age as 39 as just some fantasy. Throughout the conversation, the dude was visibly nervous, pacing around the room like crazy. But even with all that jitteriness, he was begging Chris not to read the chat log, claiming he already knew what was in it. But Chris, he had his mind set on embarrassing him.
What grade do you teach?
High school.
Well, why did you come here, though? Help me to understand.
As Baps left the Sting house, he was immediately taken into custody. The man resisted making any statements when questioned by the police, but surprisingly, just 2 days after bailing out of jail, he returned to the classroom and continued teaching for several more days. Wait, this wasn't supposed to happen. Did the system fail us? I guess it did. Although Baps was suspended without pay from school, when Dateline interviewed his students, some of them shared speculative stories about what he was supposedly doing in the classroom. And no, it wasn't anything to do with academic. Now, here comes an often quoted Stinghouse resident because of his distinctive speech impediment. John Adam Daniels was apprehended in the Forston, Georgia sting, and this dude thoroughly enjoyed engaging in an explicit conversation with youngster.
Online, he asks her if she wants to try anal sex.
Just minutes after their chat had begun, he had already told her that he wanted to see her and even said that she should wear a skirt for their first encounter. Skirts seem to be in pretty high demand in this video, huh? If that wasn't creepy enough, he even asked her what experience she had with a man's tool, and then pondered being her boyfriend.
Did you try some of my sweet tea?
He told her that he wouldn't kill her or anything, but just wanted to go all the way. The fact that you need to specify that should maybe indicate that you need to take a step back and a good hard look in the mirror. Well, self-reflection wasn't Daniel's strong suit, so he made the 4-hour trek to get to the Sting house in Forston, Georgia. And once he was in, he grabbed a glass of sweet tea. What's more, he brought her a drink and some Kit Kats along with his overnight bag. When Chris showed up, the color drained from Daniel's face. He inquired if they're recording the whole thing, and when Chris confirmed it, you have to see the prick's reaction.
Am I being taped?
You are being taped.
Oh, crap.
He even agreed with Chris that he knew he was doing something wrong and that he wasn't sure why he'd come to the house in the first place, saying that he quickly decided to leave with his bags, but as soon as he walked out, he was captured by the local police.
Am I gonna be upbeat? Oh, arrested?
That's not up to me.
After Daniels was nabbed, it came to light that he had his mom search for and jot down directions to the setup's house, with her thinking he was headed to a job for cabinet making. What's crazier? His hat sported the logo of his employer, and predictably, he got the boot from the company once the episode aired. And now, here comes a computer engineer who ended up paying a big price for succumbing to his fantasies. 31-year-old Chandra was absolutely unhinged when it came to the online conversation.
I hope I'm not in trouble.
He was initially hesitant on coming to the house because, in his own words, he would be known as a pedo if he were to get caught. Yeah, he knew the consequences. But that didn't stop him from driving to the Sting house. I mean, how are these guys so self-aware yet so stupid?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
How are the strawberries?
When faced by Chris, Nuna insisted he believed the setup was by herself and his intention was to simply take her out for coffee. He further contended that he could play the role of her big brother. However, Chris debunked his explanations by pointing out the contradictions in his chat log, where Nuna expressed fear of being arrested and labeled as a pedo. I mean, clearly, his totally fake story was busted.
And that's what I told her very clearly. What are you even doing here?
He admitted that some intimate stuff was talked about, but that was only because the setup had initiated it, and he would never do such a terrible thing. Despite his continued claims of just checking in on her, Chris revealed his identity and exposed Nuna on national TV. When questioned by the police, Nuna insisted that he was merely asking if she was okay, and all the topics were brought up by her. Come on, man, stop with the lying already.
She kept asking me and I told her it's not right.
Nuna opted for a trial, and the outcome remains undisclosed. However, he was likely acquitted given that he continued to reside in the US for another 5 years after his appearance on the show. However, his reputation in society took a big hit. The fact that people like him can get away with doing such horrible things is really concerning.
I just wanted to make sure she's alright.
I can't imagine how anyone could be so audacious and sport a smile in the face of consequences. Could he not even feel a little bit of remorse or guilt? Well, be that as it may, that's a wrap up on today's video featuring the dudes who clearly ruined their own lives. But this absolutely isn't an exhaustive list. I could have talked about any of the hundreds of people who've come through the Sting house over the year. But if you've got someone you want me to talk about, make sure to drop those names in the comments below. And don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and turn on those post notifications. And hey, you can also visit my social media pages where you can stay up to date with all of my content. Also, I've got another mind-blowing video drop right here, so don't forget to check it out.